The minority in parliament is warning it will resist any attempt by the NPP government to amend the Oil Revenue Management Act to allow for the use of the Heritage Fund to finance its free SHS policy.
The fund is therefore not just an incompetent way of redeeming a campaign promise, but a lazy man's approach that completely undermines the national consensus and painstaking effort made to balance among
The group explains the proposal to use the Heritage Fund to champion the free SHS program will destabilize the country's economy and negatively affect the value of the Ghanaian cedi.
We urge the NPP government to stay off the Heritage Fund. Hands off the Heritage Fund, for it is particularly reserved as savings for future generations. We cannot sit idle while the NPP attempt to mortgage our future for their partisan objectives.
Senior Minister Osafo Maafo earlier this week hinted the NPP government will make use of the Heritage Fund to finance the free SHS, which is slated to start in September this year. But this has sparked a heated debate over whether or not the fund is being used for its intended purpose. So what does the Oil Revenue Management Act say? Does it support the use of the fund for this purpose? We will be getting into the skin of the matter and bring you all the analysis. This is today's big story. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. The minority in parliament is describing as lazy and incompetent plans by the NPP government to dip its hands into the Heritage Fund to fulfill their campaign promise. We can listen to Ato Forsen, who is minority spokesperson for the Finance Committee.
Went around the country to solicit views from various sections of Ghanaian society. The committee also painstakingly consulted with our development partners such as the World Bank and the IMF, and drew lessons from international best practices in oil-producing countries such as Trinidad and Tobago, United Kingdom, and Norway. The Petroleum Revenue Management Act is a product of national consensus and went through a series of processes, including executive and legislative approvals, and regarded as one of the best legislations for national resource revenue management in the world. The importance of this recap is for Ghanaians to note that the debate over the application of the Heritage Fund as raised by the senior minister is not new. The question as to spend oil revenue now or save towards the future were discussed in detail at the various fora, at cabinet and in parliament. A delicate balance was therefore agreed to take account of the various views expressed on this matter, in recognition of the fact that the nation would need resources for development. A higher premium was placed on current development, which explains why only 9% of the petroleum revenues were allocated to the Heritage Fund, and 91% allocated to the annual budget funding account and that of the Stabilization Fund. Another balance which the NPP proposal on free senior high school financing seek to destroy is that up to 70% of the total petroleum receipt allocated to the ABFA should be used for infrastructure development. It is also important to note that education is included in the 4 priority sectors which the ABFA is applied. Furthermore, the nation has placed a higher premium on education, thereby allocating 2.5% of the VAT base to get fund, aside the budget allocation to the education sector of the economy and the portion of the District Assembly Common Fund, which we normally call the DACF, allocated by the assemblies for the application of the education sector at the district level. The plan to use the Heritage Fund is therefore not just an incompetent way of redeeming a campaign promise, but a lazy man's approach that completely undermines the national consensus and painstaking effort made to create a balance among the following: A, savings versus expenditure; 2, recurrent expenditure versus capital expenditure; and C, allocating of national resources among all sectors of the economy. It is obvious that the Heritage Fund, its investment and the amount accrued so far would be woefully inadequate to meet close to $1 billion required annually to underwrite a free senior high school program. We also wish to remind Ghanaians that the proposal to allocate the Heritage Fund to education is not without other costs. First, the Heritage Fund forms part of the core reserves of the nation through Bank of Ghana, which takes into account the long-term needs of the nation, such as the macroeconomic stability of the country. Secondly, the notion that the Heritage Fund is set aside from the country's fiscal management is erroneous, since a critical examination of the fiscal table in the budget shows that there's an accounting set-off between revenue generation and deficit financing. Therefore, the withdrawal of Heritage Fund is likely to have a negative impact on the country's reserve, the value of the currency, and will lead to a likely destabilization of the macroeconomic and fiscal situation of the country. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it appears the NPP government have run out of ideas within their first month in office as to how to fund their flagship campaign program of providing free senior high school education. We in NDC would like to offer them free advice to rather reallocate the distribution of national resources from sectors they regard as non-priority to their campaign promises. We urge the NPP government to stay off the Heritage Fund, hands off the Heritage Fund, for it is particularly reserved as savings for future generations. Since petroleum resources are not renewable, future generations deserve a shot at progress, and that is what the Heritage Fund seeks to achieve. We cannot sit idle while the NPP attempt to mortgage our future for their partisan objective.
Let's do some analysis now, because in the studio is a member of parliament who is also a minority member for Bia East in the Western region, and a member of the Finance Committee. He joins me in Parliament. Good evening to you. Thanks for having you on today's big story. You are calling the NPP as incompetent already. You're giving back the name they gave to you whilst you were in power because they want to dip their hands into the Heritage Fund. But one will say that education is, the best legacy a government can give to its people. Why are you against it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Aisha, and a very good evening to your cherished viewers. We are not saying we should not fund education. And NDC, for that matter, the minority, we are not kicking against the free SHS project. We are all for it. But we are calling for a sustainable source of funding for the free education. That's our point. Because MPP, for the past 8 years, touted that we have the men, they have the capacity. We asked them, where are you going to get the money to fulfill all these promises? They told us the money is here. We are going to widen the tax net. We are going to do this. We are going to do that. So we were expecting that they will come up with new ideas. What are we talking about here? The Heritage Fund is about $262 million. For almost 5 years, that's accumulation. And we've done some calculations. With this free SHS, we're looking at between $1 billion every year. So assuming we've given you the $262 million, it can fund it. So tell us a very sustainable source of funding for this project. What about next year? Up to the 4-year tenure that we've given you. So we're looking at about $4 billion. So let's get a sustainable source of funding. Because some people go to school because of this project, and next year you tell us there's no source of funding. We're giving you 91% of the oil revenue, because 70% is ABFA, the annual budget funding amount. Another 21% is a stabilization fund.
Right.
Just 9%. You want to deal with the 9%. If 91% cannot solve their problems, how come the 9%?
But it could be a support to whatever funds they have already. But some years back, the NDC also wanted to dip its hands into the oil revenue coffers. And back then, you wanted to fix the bad economy then. So how come it became all wrong? Or is it that when you are in power, it's right, and without you, it then becomes wrong?
This is a very beautiful idea. I have people saying this. But we have different scenarios that we're dealing with. We wanted to deal with the doomsome menace that was bedeviled the country. And it was one-off payment. Assuming we use part of the money to procure generator set to fill the domso, today we are not going to buy another generator. It's one-off payment, but this is recurrent expenditure. So if you start this project, every month teachers must be paid, textbooks must be procured, school uniform must be procured, computer must be procured, every year, every quarter. So it's recurrent expenditure. But that was capital expenditure. It's one-off. So assuming we use, let's say, $100 million to procure a set of generators to give us a leverage over the doom so that everybody was complaining about. Today, we are not going to buy another generator. So the analysis is different. The capital expenditure or the headlines is quite different. This capital expenditure and this recurrent expenditure. So if you want to embark on recurrent expenditure, you should have a very reliable source of funding so that along the line you will not hit the wall by saying we have to go and borrow. Remember what happened to the school feeding project? Because it was being funded from external sources. When they got annoyed with us, they stopped financing us. It collapsed until NDC came to power to revive it and expanded it. So we are just advising them they should think outside the box. You have 91%. Prioritize your needs. He's telling us he's going to create 4 regions, meaning you're going to appoint 4 regional ministers and deputies, 8 ministers, together with the secretariat. If you appoint about 36 ministers, you are not dealing with deputy ministers.
But the NDC government did the same. Why are you complaining?
So if you want to embark on this project, you have to cut your expenditure. In economics, if you want to do another project, whatever, either your cash inflow, you look at the cash inflow. So if your cash inflow is reducing, what you have to do is to maintain your expenditure or reduce it. You cannot increase your expenditure and reduce your revenue. Deficit will just catch up with you. So we are advising them. That's why we started as NDC, progressively free education, looking at financial circumstances. Because you just cut your coat according to your size. So if you want to fulfill your campaign promise, just think outside the box. Find an innovative way of financing it so that it can run through the years so that any government that will come will continue with the project.
Okay, you're advising they find innovative ways, but
yes.
You didn't specifically give them what innovative ways they could use in funding the SHS.
So like I told
SHS.
you have the road infrastructure, you have hospital infrastructure, extension of electricity. So if you think expanding of electricity is not your priority, you can suspend that project, use the money to fund free SHS so that people will know that this is a source of funding. Like even if we have GET fund, common fund, there's a portion that goes into education. Communication task, there's a portion that goes into that. There's a dedicated fund for education, even in the budget. Close to 40% goes into education. So it's not like the previous administration didn't do anything in respect of education. We started the progressive free education. So it's not like NDC is kicking against it. We're telling them that, tell us the source of funding. And that source of funding should be sustainable. It's not like a one-off thing that I promise you this, so I want to deliver by 1 year time, I cannot do it. Because granted, the 262 million is given to this current administration to fund free SHS. You're looking at 1 billion. So take 262 from 1 billion. How much are we talking of? What about next year?
How do we fund it?
How do we fund it up to the end of your term of 2020 or 2021? So tell us a very reliable source of funding. That's all what we are calling for.
All right. Your colleague, Kofi Boa, makes the point that this oil revenue thing has a lifespan of 25 years.
Yes.
And of course, so we need to save some of the amount for generations that will not meet this oil revenue. Well, I think we should listen to him. After that, we can do some discussions around that.
For a particular oil production, what we are talking about is a maximum of 25 to 30 years. And we are saying that only 9% is what we are setting aside for future generation. It has been described that we are going to look at this, review it in 15 years. We are just in the 5th year. All we have is $260 million. And it's not even close, 30% of what we want to achieve. And so the issue is this the only place we can look? Ladies and gentlemen, we remember not too long ago in the campaign, the MPP were telling the whole Ghana that they have the men, they have the brains. We are dumb. We don't know where the money is. They have the resources. They are just coming in and plug the holes and make sure that they bring the resources. They have it. Now is the time to basically make it happen. But we are saying that we support the free SHS. In fact, it's not only that we support it, we've started the progressive implementation of it. And we've done it, and we've prioritized education. In the history of this country, if you looked at our budget in the last two budgets, how much was allocated to the budget was historic. And that should tell you that the NDC is committed to education. But we know what is hands-off, and we are saying that the Heritage Fund is hands-off. And that's all we are saying. Let's look at other areas and support this agenda the MPP have, but not the Heritage Fund, this 9%, PT 9%. So many of us wished it had been 30%, but we knew that we had constrained, and that's why it's 9%. And this is not the time to touch that money. So this is for the MPP to look at other options, so that we can move forward. But they should not even think about coming to Parliament to amend the PRMA.
Thank you.
All right, so Emmanuel Kofi Boa is former petroleum minister who makes the point that because the oil revenue will span for only 25 years, we need to save some amount for generations to come so they can also enjoy it. Well, joining us on the other phone line to join the conversation is Yao Pong, who is a private legal practitioner. Good evening to you. You're welcome to today's big story.
Good evening.
You endorsed the use of the oil fund some long time ago, even before this proposal by the NPP government. What's your conviction?
Thank you very much. And my position on this is absolute. It's been so since 2013. And I repeated it when I remember Mr. Sedun Ketia also expressed his view on it. And the point is simple. I think a lot of people are looking at the provision that says that the portion of the petroleum revenue should be taken and invested in terms of what is called the Heritage Fund. And that the provision states that it must serve as a fund to support the development for future generations. So the point is, and of course, a generation has generally been referred to as a 30 years period. So the point is that if you have this fund invested, and usually we invest them in foreign bonds or other financial instruments, and there is evidence, at least as at 2012, thereabouts, we were earning a little more than 1%. In some cases, even less than 1%. When we go to the same market, these monies are recycled for us, and we are giving about 9 to 10% interest on the very money they are keeping for us. But my main take is that instead of keeping this money in liquid form, we should rather establish what we call public goods, infrastructure. And I want to restrict it to educational infrastructure and health, including support for health workers, doctors, nurses, support for teachers, and also free education. Because, as has been said, this petroleum at Jubilee Fields, for example, will last for just about 30 years, if we are lucky. And by that time, this generation we say we are saving the money for, if we had not been able to build hospitals. And I say that one of the most profound declarations I've heard in my life is what President Mahama said when the petroleum bill was being argued. That why should we save this money for the next generation when there are no hospitals for the pregnant woman to even be given safe delivery for the next generation to be born in the first place? Again, when during the First Republic, President Nkrumah and the members of parliament and the people of Ghana then decided to invest the monies we have in building schools. These schools are still available 50 years on, and a lot of us are enjoying it. So my view is that education, no doubt, as they say simply, is the key. if we don't invest in education and we rely on the petroleum revenue, it will come to a time it will deplete and we will not have anything else to rely on. But if we invest in education, we will diversify our skills and we wouldn't, or the next generation wouldn't even have to rely on petroleum or petroleum revenue.
I guess that's not to say that the framers of the act did not have education at heart when they said that the revenue should only be touched after 15 years. So how do you explain to people who feel this is in contradiction with the Oil Revenue Management Act?
Oh, well, they made the law at that time. And I'm saying that the majority view then, you know, they invited people from Norway and co. and experts, international experts like Jeffrey Sachs, who said that, look, in the case of Norway, at the time they discovered petroleum in commercial quantity, they had reasonable amount of infrastructure. And so they could have properly saved this money. And these are documented. And that in the case of poor countries like Ghana, it will make more sense to rather invest it in public goods, as I say, infrastructure, and human resource development. And then when we have achieved reasonable, if you like, amount of infrastructure, then we can even decide to save and spend the interest on the savings. But why would you even, let's say that we should even invest it. Why should we invest this money in the U.S. and so on, and then our contractors and other business people are here taking loans with huge interest when we put the money in another country with virtually very insignificant interest? So if people will still insist that we should invest these monies in financial instruments, then let's do so in Ghana. But I'm saying that my absolute position on it is rather, as we are here now, we need to rather facilitate, first of all, the delivery of the so-called future generation by getting more hospitals and education, and then they can be persons who will be self-sufficient and wouldn't even have to rely on petroleum revenue.
Well, many thanks. Joe Yaopong is a private legal practitioner, and he makes a point that it's appropriate to dip hands into the Oil Revenue Heritage Fund, and he explains why. But certainly you want to boycott any move, because definitely they cannot touch it until there is some amendments in Parliament, and you have vowed to boycott any move to do that. But how do you intend to do it, looking at your numbers?
Yeah, but actually, let me first react to what Lawyer Pong just said. We are speaking the same language here. It doesn't seem to suggest that we are not using part of the oil revenue to fund education. No. Like I told you, about 91% and the 70% that we use to support our budget, we have an education component in there.
Right.
So it's not like we are not investing in education through the oil revenue.
Okay.
And then the account that he said is giving us a very low yield or returns. It's never true.
Right.
We have two accounts, 122.5 million in lending account and 140 million in Accra account. These monies are part of our reserves. So if we are talking about our import cover and all that, we use this money to do the calculations. So if we deplete this account, meaning our reserves is going to reduce.
Right.
And it has its consequences on our imports.
Okay.
So we should not be just using one leg of the argument just because we want to push this agenda. No.
Okay.
We have about 40% of the oil revenue used to fund education already. Okay. What we are saying is the 91%, if it cannot fund education, what would the 9% do? So we are saying we'll resist this. When the amendment is proposed on the floor, we'll begin from there. It will be referred to either the Finance Committee or a Joint Committee of Finance and Energy. A member of the Finance Committee will do same at the committee level. If so, they persist, we'll resort to court action. If so, the court rule in their favor, we'll resort to the streets. And it's not about NDC, it's about we the Ghanaians. Like they say, we should use infrastructure development here and there. You and I, by the end of the month, if you take your side, don't you save?
You do. I do.
For what?
I do save. I mean, for future purposes.
You make provision for unforeseen contingencies.
Right.
You cannot eat all your eggs. Then why do you give our eggs for our hands to hash?
All right. But how far do you see your voice going? I mean, looking at your numbers, we know how it works.
We know they have their numbers. So if they use their numbers to bully us, the Ghanaian populace will know the position of NDC then and now. So so that if all of you will not join the forces to resist this, posterity will come to judge us. Because what did we do? We ran into this dead disease. Right now, there are litigations ongoing with Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana with this maritime issue. Right. So, assuming the arbitration court give the ruling in favor of Cote d'Ivoire, meaning we're going to lose part of these oil resources. And like Honorable Kofi Amabua said, the last plan of a well or just an enclave, the must be 25 years. Right. You know, when we were passing this act at 815, we, the people of Western Region, we requested for 10% of oil revenue. Why? Because our farmlands are being destroyed, because gas is a byproduct of the oil. The pipe that they laid through our farms and our properties, we were not given. Granted, if that 10% was given to the people of Western Region, can then people go back to Western Region people and request for this 10%? Because we wanted to use this for a developmental project so that posterity will come to see that having destroyed our farmlands, having destroyed our forests, this is what we were able to achieve from the oil revenue. So if we are believing like other people that yesterday is gone, tomorrow has not come, so let's make use of today, so be it. Let's eat, dine, and sleep without making any provision for unforeseen contingencies. All right. We cannot be going outside to borrow all the time, assuming you go and you don't get the facility.
But interestingly, there's a twist to this conversation because Kweku Kwarteng is also with the Finance Committee, and he says that they've not said they are going to totally take money from the Heritage Fund. I think we should listen to him first, then we can make a meaningful conversation here.
Government has not made any decision to finance the free SHS program from the Heritage Fund. That has to be understood from the outset. Government has not made that decision. I agree with many of the views that have been shared that if at all government decided to do that, it would require some legislative changes. We are mindful of the fact that if that were done, it would deplete the Heritage Fund. So many of the perspectives shared for me are legitimate points of view expressed, except to say that we should wait for the 2017 budget statement that is going to be presented in the first week of March. And of course, the free SHS is a commitment to Ghanaians that we will fulfill in this budget statement. The funding sources for the programs we roll out in the 2017 budget statements will be made clear.
All right, so that's Kweku Kwarteng. Do you still maintain your stance after listening to Kweku Kwarteng?
Yeah, Kweku Kwarteng was a member of the Finance Committee, of which I was a member, and still the two of us are still members of so I don't know the capacity of which that he's speaking, but I know certain, but since it's not made public, I will not comment on that.
Right.
Osafo Mafu is the senior minister. And if we listen to his version, when he appeared before the appointed committee, we asked his reporting lines. He told us that he will report directly to the president, not the vice president, not the chief of staff.
Right. So he's more closer to the president.
More of a prime minister in that respect.
Right.
So if such a person comes out to tell the public that we are going to use the Heritage Fund to finance the free SHS, who am I to doubt this? Right. Because the Prime Minister has spoken.
So you want to believe him more than Kweku Kwarteng?
For now, I don't see the capacity of Kweku Kwarteng in this matter. Right. But he does a member of the Finance Committee, and he will not start any work. But no paper is laid before the House, and nothing has been referred to our committee. So like he said, let's wait patiently when the budget comes. And if there's something of that sort, because anytime they are bringing the budget, if they want to do some amendment, it will be accompanied with the budget. They will peruse it further, but we want to serve a notice.
So then,
if this is part of their contemplations, they should halt it.
All right. Many thanks for your time on today's big story. We'll keep an eye on this developing story, and we'll bring you all the updates on our subsequent bulletins. Many thanks for watching. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Have a great evening.